Hi everyone, my name is Samantha Teichman and I'll be presenting my paper Nova Scotia Strong, Online Mourning as Collective Identities and Sites of Healing. Before starting, I want to issue a content warning as this presentation will touch on issues of gun violence and mass shootings that recently occurred in Nova Scotia. This content may be disturbing, so I encourage you to prepare yourself emotionally beforehand. If you find this presentation to be upsetting, I encourage you to mute me or perhaps use my presentation to make a copy. Thank you kindly. On April 18th and 19th of this year, the unthinkable happened in Nova Scotia as many rural communities were the setting of the deadliest rampage in Canadian history. 22 women and men were brutally killed by a lone gunman who committed multiple shootings and set fires to 16 locations in the province of Nova Scotia. One critical detail of this horrific event is that it occurred during the global pandemic COVID-19. As a result of the pandemic, physical distancing restrictions have been set, and this ultimately has shaped the ways in which individuals, Nova Scotians, and Canadians more generally mourn this tragedy. COVID-19 has disrupted our sense of normalcy, and as a result, much of the everyday has switched to virtual mediums, including the way we grieve. Recovery from mass tragedy is often rooted in collective action and community building. Specifically, scholars draw attention to the social relations within communities and the processes related to respond to tragedy. Albert Hunter's descriptions of the private, parochial, and public spheres of community serve as an important point of analysis for examining recovery from mass tragedy. The parochial sphere, which is the local interpersonal networks and interlocking institutions that serve the community and its members, including the networks of stores, schools, religions, and voluntary associations, is critical to recovery. These relations can both amplify and sustain solidarity and recovery from tragedy, as event-specific parochial events such as vigils and religious ceremonies often foster an atmosphere of healing. The mobilization of these parochial events often turn to mass communication platforms such as social media to notify community members of the event and its logistics. In recent years, social media has become the venue of these events as well, as we see a rise in Thana technology, which is technology used to cope with death, dying, illness, and grief, through online events such as virtual memorials and cyber funerals. These online spaces can be used to create a collected memory, which is described as a place where people can create a repository of pictures, stories, and shared experiences that individual mourners may pick and choose from in satisfying their needs for grieving and closure. Thus, we see a rise in the practice of online mourning. Online mourning includes practices such as users sharing eulogies, posting stories of their loved ones who have passed, interacting with the deceased online profile, and expressing their grief online. This medium allows for collective grief to be experienced together even when apart, which was the reality for Nova Scotians during this global pandemic. Physical distancing restrictions initially halted any in-person funerary practices. Therefore, for Nova Scotians in mourning, social media became a vital tool for individuals to design collective models of mourning. I label these moments of online mourning as performative acts of grief. The grief that is presented in these online spaces is an embodied experience that has real and material effects for people who experience loss. One of the ways in which collective action and community building can be encouraged in wake of mass tragedy is through national mourning. Communities and individuals therein cope and respond to tragedy through the mobilization of collective action. Specifically, recent work draws attention to how Canadians do national identity in key spaces, and to the way in which these communities can reinforce a Canadian identity that is rooted in compassion, kindness, and resolve. In the case of Nova Scotia, we see these similar characteristics of compassion, kindness, and resolve embedded in the identity of national mourning. For example, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's response to the tragedy included key phrases as such. This happened in small towns. Portapique, Truro, Milford, and Enfield are places where people have deep roots, places where people know their neighbors and look out for one another. There, everyone knows a Mountie because they are everything from police officers to social workers to team counselors. Now these communities are in mourning, and Canada is in mourning with them. To the grandparent who lost a child, the children who lost a parent, to the neighbor who lost a friend, we are so sorry for your loss. Such a tragedy should have never occurred. Violence of any kind has no place in Canada. We stand with you and we grieve with you, and you can count on our government's full support during this incredible, painful time. Trudeau's response not only embodies this Canadian identity of compassion, kindness, and resolve, but additionally his political position as Prime Minister helps to construct this collective identity of national mourning. Online mediums can become a space to construct national mourning through parochial events. Specifically, in relation to the Nova Scotia shooting, the hashtag NovaScotiaStrong was spontaneously created in the wake of the losses, and it was used in countless posts, stories, captions, and tweets, and ultimately captured the collective grief Canada was experiencing. Furthermore, Canadians have been inspired by their online mourning community to perform grief in their non-virtual lives. As a way of acknowledging the tragedy and additionally documenting online, many began to place Nova Scotia tartans or blue scarves outside their homes. As many shared posts and photos to express their condolences and grief for those impacted by the shooting, we are reminded of the ways Canada mourned the victims of the 2018 Humboldt Bronco bus accident. The social media played a significant role in grieving practices, seen in the use of Facebook profile filters and the hashtag #SticksOutForHumboldt. The hashtag in particular was tied to a mourning practice that was organized in online spaces, as Brian Munns, a former broadcaster, tweeted out, "Leave your sticks out, the boys may need it wherever they are." As individuals around the world placed their hockey sticks outside their front doors in an act of solidarity with the team, and additionally shared those photos of their front door steps online with the hashtag, a collective identity and online community was created. In both tragedies, the hashtag categorizes the content and simultaneously builds a shared identity and a community of national mourning, therefore suggesting that these online spaces are not understood as neutral objects, but as sites of political power. One significant difference between the national mourning of the Humboldt Bronco bus crash and the Nova Scotia shooting is the physical distancing restrictions in place due to COVID-19. These restrictions have completely altered traditional funerary practices, and thus practices of online mourning have become an essential tool to processing this mass tragedy during an already unprecedented time of history. Online mourning still played a significant role in the Humboldt Bronco bus crash, as digital media infrastructure expanded the sense of community and national mourning through hashtags and challenged geographical barriers by live streaming the locally held vigil. However, the rural communities of Nova Scotia, who were directly impacted by this mass shooting, were not afforded the same opportunity to collectively gather and heal. While traditional vigil was prohibited, these online spaces provided the opportunity to create an alternative. A vigil planned in isolation was created, and the instructions to participate were shared far and wide via social media. Individuals in isolation were asked to light a candle on April 20th at 8:30 p.m. and share a moment of silence. The many photos that were posted at this moment allowed for a collectivity that was shared through a digital medium. As seen in the photo on the right, Mackenzie's Instagram story was accompanied by the hashtag NSStrong. By documenting this offline mourning practice and including the hashtag, Mackenzie then identifies herself with the collective identity of those mourning this loss. In addition to challenging physical distancing restrictions, online mourning virtually challenges geographical barriers as well. Both of these instances are captured through the Facebook group Nova Scotia Strong, which was created following the mass shooting. This Facebook group is a group of over 27,000 members located within and outside of Nova Scotia. On the right side of the slide, you will see a post from Pamela Rideout, who has identified herself with this identity of national mourning by using key phrases such as provincial neighbors and this nation is with you to create a collectivity to foster healing. Furthermore, the post showcases the offline mourning practices being conducted, such as the crafting of the Nova Scotia flag with paper hearts. By posting this to Facebook, Rideout's post embodies Tony Walter's neo-modern approach to death, as it's bringing these private or offline mourning practices into public and online spaces. Therefore, this Facebook post becomes a performative act of grief, an act which embodies empathy, solidarity, and healing. This group is not only a space for online mourning, but is additionally a place for community and provincial rebuilding. Within this group, you will find many posts expressing grief, but additionally, you will find users sharing positive stories about Nova Scotia that do not mention the tragedy at all, as a way of rebuilding the Nova Scotia pride. In terms of coping with profound loss, authors have noted value in meaning making and bonding over shared loss. Specifically, scholars note the value of online mourning through finding meaning following loss and an identity reconstruction, which is considered the task post-death within the social context of neo-modernism. Preceding loss, meaning-making can be conceptualized as the process by which individuals reassess and revise their sense of how the world works after their worldviews have been challenged by loss, thus involving identity reconstruction. Social media has become a space in which identity formation can occur. Thus, it is not a surprise that individuals are turning to these same online spaces to facilitate the meaning-making process of their bereavement. Many scholars have noted the value in online spaces with regard to mourning through the sense of communal grief and community that is embodied in these spaces. This presentation highlights key shared characteristics between online groups and definitions of community, such as the sense of space, shared practice, shared resources and support, shared identities, and interpersonal relationships. These characteristics allow for online sites to act as critical spaces where communities offer support to each other to allow healing individually, as a province, and as a nation. Collectively, this presentation highlights key discussions of the ways in which individuals, communities, and nations cope with mass tragedy. Online mourning practices have the ability to foster healing and community in online spaces. Social media infrastructure, such as the hashtags and Facebook groups, can be seen as creative foundations to coping with tragedy as a community. An integral part of the grieving process comes with acknowledging these emotions and behaviors that arise when mourning. When people post their grief online, the sharing, commenting, and liking of these posts act as a way of acknowledging the complicated emotions that are tied to profound loss. Furthermore, an online community and collected memory is created, and thus these actions become performative acts of grief, which promote empathy and healing. Online mourning is not a new concept and has been used by folks to mourn loss far before COVID-19 in effective and healing ways. But as argued earlier, these online spaces become even more productive and powerful when traditional coping, such as funerals, burials, and hugs, are no longer permitted. The phenomenon of online mourning uses social media as a platform and allows individuals to be vulnerable, share stories of their loved ones who have passed, and discuss their heartache, which this presentation has showed are performative acts of grief and sites of healing. Thank you.